I'm Shanna Hillard. I am the Evaluator and Interpretive Collections Coordinator here at the Zoological Society of Milwaukee. And today we are going to talk about how to test your taxidermy collection for arsenic. It is extremely important that we know which of our specimens have arsenic on them because it can be extremely dangerous to our health as well as the health of our constituents. So we want to make sure that if people are interacting with our taxidermy, that it is safe for them to do so. Since 1980, if you have any taxidermy post 1980, we do not need to test that for arsenic, but if you suspect that some of the taxidermy in your collection is prior to 1980, it should definitely be tested for arsenic. So for example, I have this duck. It is a beautiful goldeneye, a male breeding goldeneye. It's in pretty good shape, but I suspect that this bird is or was taxidermied prior to 1980. So I'm going to test it because we would like to use it in a classroom. And if it is positive for arsenic, we might choose a different animal to work with. Before you do anything, step one is to inspect the piece of taxidermy. So you want to take a good look and see if there are any obvious signs of arsenic contamination or arsenic leaking out of the product. Arsenic was applied to taxidermy prior to 1980 as a paste to deter insects and other critters from nibbling on the piece itself. But over time, that arsenic leaches to the surface of the piece and can look like kind of crystalline things at the bottom of the piece. Look around the eyes to see if there's any white crystals or dust that appears. That's not always a 100% guarantee of arsenic, but if you see any pieces like that in your collection, I would prioritize testing those first. So this bird, he's looking pretty clean. I don't see any dust or crystals, but we are still going to go ahead and do testing. So the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to swab the bird to get a good sample that we can test. So you can do this in a couple of different ways. You can use just a normal Q-tip, or if you would like to be a little more economical and roll your own, you can make them using these jumbo cotton balls and some of these bamboo skewers. I find that I have a little more luck with the Q-tips, but you can certainly roll your own. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take a tube that is full of just distilled water. So you can get this at any grocery store, any pharmacy, but it must be distilled. So what I'm going to do is open up the tube and I am going to just dip the Q-tip in just enough to get it slightly damp. If you see that you've dipped it a little too far, kind of squeeze it against the end of the test tube and drain off that excess water. So you can see this one is just slightly damp. And then what we are going to do is we are going to gently just roll it over the bird. So you do not need to put a lot of pressure, just gently roll it over the feathers. Again, you do not want to see that there's a lot of moisture building up on the feathers of the bird. Again, just do your best to be as gentle as possible. I'm swabbing in a couple different places on the bird just to make sure that I get a decent sample. Again, if you do see those crystalline deposits, do your best to get the sample from that area. After that, you have your sample. So if you are going to test right away, you can just hang on to this, or if you are testing at a later date, if you're gathering a bunch of samples to do at once, then you can put it in a Ziploc bag and make sure that you identify it by its accession number or by what the species is if you are waiting to accession it into your collection. So the next thing that we are going to do now that we have our treated sample here is we are going to test for the presence of arsenic. You want to do this in a very well ventilated area. Ideally, if you have a lab or an area with a hood, a ventilation hood, that is the best place to be doing this. We are doing it in a very well ventilated classroom. And I always wear protective gloves because you are working with some chemicals in order to obtain this result, and also potentially the arsenic on the specimen itself. We are going to take our GoldenEyes sample here, and we are going to test it. So the first thing that I will do is take out the sample, and I am going to put it in 10 milliliters of that distilled water that we mentioned before. So normally the testing kit that you will be able to purchase, this one is from Thomas Scientific, but there are plenty that you can purchase on Amazon as well. They are for testing for water, arsenic in water supplies. So what we will need to do is we will need to get this into here and kind of mix it up so that the sample is mixed in with the water. So we're going to open this test tube, and we are going to cut the Q-tip. So once you have the Q-tip tip in the water itself, you are going to want to just gently shake it. You don't need to be too aggressive with this. You can just kind of give it a light shake, just to make sure that whatever is on that Q-tip is now mixing in with that distilled water. Take one of the vials that comes with the kit. It has a special cap on the top that you can insert the test strip into. You can use these as well, but you need to buy, I believe it is called paraffin film. It's like a very sticky film that makes an airtight seal over the top so that you don't need to use these blue caps. Once you add the reagents, it needs to be airtight or the test will not work properly. So you can use these kinds of test tubes. They're pretty economical. You can find them at science supply stores, or I believe you can find them on Amazon as well. But you will need that paraffin film to make that airtight seal for once you add the chemicals. So I'm going to use the ones that came with the kit, and I'm just going to introduce our sample to this. So we can see Q-tips in there, and we've got our sample. Now we are going to add the reagents. So depending on what kind of kit that you have, these things might be labeled differently, but it is extremely important that before you do this test, that you look at the directions which come in the kit, as well as the material safety data sheet. That will come with a kit as well. I'm going to add, for this particular kit, this is reagent AS1, and I need 1 scoop of it. The scoop is built right into the top of this kit, which is convenient. Again, depending on which kind of kit you get, you might end up with something that looks a little bit different. Make sure to read the instructions that come with the kit. 1 leveled scoop, and then I am going to take out the reagent AS2. Now this one, according to the instructions in my kit, says you need 2 level scoops of this particular size. 1 scoop. 2 scoops. And I am going to close this up immediately to create that airtight seal, because what you are seeing right now with the bubbling is a chemical reaction that is happening with the sample. So what we want to do is we want to insert a test tube to capture some of the gas that is a product of this chemical reaction, and that will tell us when we look at the test strip whether or not this particular sample has arsenic in it. Test tube has been inserted into the top and folded over. You can test this a couple of times with nothing inside of it if you want to practice. Ideally, we want the test strip to not be touching the side of the test tube, but as long as the area that has the testing pad is not touching the side of the test tube, you should be fine. So what you are going to do now is hurry up and wait because it takes about 20 minutes. So once your time frame is up, again, we tested for 20 minutes, you are going to remove the sample test strip and we are going to compare it to the colors that are on our test strip sheet here. So you just hold it up and you kind of slide along until you find the color that matches most. So to me, this one looks pretty white. If this happens, you can kind of assume that this one is good to go. However, if you see any amount of color on it, you will probably have an arsenic laden specimen on your hands. If it's white and you don't see any arsenic, that does not mean that you are home free. It could mean that the specimen is just not old enough for that process to have begun. So that is why you test all of your taxidermy annually. So once a year, you should do these tests. If it is negative, you still want to test it because it might end up being positive one year, and then you will need to take the proper precautions.